first person that we would love to kickstart our conference is Dr. Michael Kirst. He is the former president of the California State Board of Education and the Stanford Emeritus Professor of Education and Business Administrations. In 2021, as I share with you, he became the president of the California State Board of Education for the second time, emphasize second time. And Professor Kirst was a member and then later on become the president of the California State Board. He held several positions in the federal government, including the staff director of the U.S. Senate Subcommittee on Manpower, Employment and Poverty, and director of program planning and evaluations for the Bureau of Elementary and Secondary Education in the U.S. Office of Education, now known to be the U.S. Department of Education. Well, that was long, but the man himself were able to witness all kinds of educational reforms and changes. And we would love for him to open the second day for us today as he shared with us a little bit of what happened in the past and the role of technology. How did the role of technology play in the past, and how is it going right now? So I'm not going to hold you for any longer. Please welcome Dr. Michael Kirst. All right, let me see. Hi, Mike.
Hi, can you see me? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. Well, it's a great pleasure to be here. Just to correct the record, I got to be president of the State Board of Education for the second time in 2011. I think he said 2021. So Linda Darling-Hammond, my neighbor here at Stanford, we live on the campus together, is the current president. And so I'm looking forward to this. I've been a member of the board of the Silicon Valley Education Foundation for over 11 years. So I'm very familiar with the organization and its evolution, and I have really enjoyed working with it. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the future of here I am. Okay, it says start my video. Yeah, I didn't think I was on. Here I am. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the past and the future of the use in the schools, and not so much at home, but in the schools around technology with an historical view, and then bring it up to the current period of time. And if we have any time, we can have some questions. So I see this is an extraordinary time, obviously, for education technology. Nobody saw this coming, and what's happening is even more dramatic. So I'm going to open up with, not with my slides, which is more the history, but let me preface this with saying that we've had so much of an increase in technology, and so I think that it really is worthwhile to begin by looking in the past. But I will preface that with saying, and I'll come back to this, how an extraordinary time this is in education, given that the pandemic has led to a huge natural experiment with technology, with an expansion that you're all aware of. And I think that's going to be at the end. I'll talk about the future. So let's start looking back, and it's I'm going to end with an optimistic future, and I'm going to start with a pessimistic past in terms of the use of technology in schools and the use of technology between home and schools, which is close to you. So my colleagues at Stanford and I have done a lot of studies of what types of reforms in the public education have lasted. And as you'll see, one of those that's never been wholeheartedly embraced or widespread and deeply embedded in regular classroom instruction or regular schools has been technology. So let's start off with some things that have. And you'll see all of these, of course, are major changes. And, we go back to 1900 in some of the look at this, and you can see that schools change a great deal. And these sorts of changes have been fundamental and have lasted and are virtually everywhere in the schools. Although if you look back to the turn of the last century, the 20th century, very few of these things existed. Okay, let's look at some that haven't passed in the next slide, that have not lasted, I should say. So what hasn't failed or faded or been marginalized, all of these exist, but not widespread. So there we see a different list. We see things like team teaching. That was all the rage when I began at Stanford in 1969. It's around, but not widespread. There have been several versions of the new math. There was a new math that the National Science Foundation tried after Sputnik in the 50s, and that faded out. And there have been other attempts to fundamentally alter the mathematics curriculum. They seem to be gathering some steam with Common Core, but generally the mathematics has been slowed and is still marginally implemented. The project method of teaching, that's out there. I'm sure many teachers use it, but it is not as widespread as the things that I showed on the first slide, where everything has most all areas of education have adopted these, and project method is, some teachers use it, appears by studies most don't. We've talked for years about merit pay for teaching, that teachers who are evaluated higher, however you evaluate them, which we still haven't figured out, would get more money. We do pay teachers some more who teach English learners, for example. But basically, we're on the last time we changed a teacher salary schedule was in 1924, when we equalized the men and the women on a salary schedule, which now goes by years of service and various kinds of professional development or courses. Now we get to technology. So here we have an example of something that has really not changed the schools fundamentally. By that, I mean changed the classrooms across America, the hundreds of thousands of classrooms. People in this study that we worked on were old enough to remember when radio was going to change the schools. If you were reading things in the 1930s, radio was going to be all over the schools. It was the new technology. When I began my career, which is very long ago in the 1960s, educational television within the schools, I'm not talking about Sesame Street, which has lasted and is a good example of a reform that has lasted, but it's not in the schools. It's, as we'll see, it meets the definitions of what reforms last. So that was, we bought hundreds of millions of dollars of educational television sets in the 60s and the 70s, and they all ended up in closets and not a lot of use by teachers. Then, of course, computers were to change everything, and the verdict is still out on that, as we shall discuss. But the computers were largely marginalized, used for supplemental work, used for administrative work, grading, and so on. Some people used them a lot, but nothing like we saw, of course, in the past year plus under COVID. People kept saying, well, the business machines
Alexa, how much time is left in the timer?
They're too big and too clunky. And so wait till we get handheld. I remember the Apple classroom at the Morrow, which was all business machines and kids with these big machines. That didn't work. And then we got handheld, and I thought that would take off. But of course, a lot of the kids check their handheld devices at the door, and the handheld didn't lead to as much as we thought. So technology has been slow and marginalized. And the question before us today is, what will happen with all of this transformation that we've seen in the last year? And I'll be frank, I don't know. And so we'll lay it out and see where we go. Okay, next one, please. Okay, what kinds of things have lasted and been spread widely across most classrooms? Well, they're largely structural or organizational reforms that and that we reform by adding things or intensifying past school structures. So we've added after-school programs. We've added charter schools. We've added some mentor teachers. We've added all the things I had in the first list. We've added vocational education and kindergarten. Advanced placement has been added and is widespread. So it's a structural additional add-on largely, or a structural change. Second of all, it's created a strong constituency. And we'll come back to these, special education it has a powerful constituency. Charter schools have spread across the country. They have a strong constituency. And so they've tended to last. Of course, kindergarten. Advanced placement has a constituency of the universities, which support credit for advanced placement. And lastly, changes that last are easily monitored. Unlike the use of pedagogy, we don't know what teachers are doing behind the classroom door. It's very hard to know. I'm pondering how much has Common Core been implemented in California? Very hard to know. You have to do surveys, so you don't know. The reforms that last, you know if you have them. You know advanced placement, you know whether you took the course, for special education, and things of that sort. So at the end, I think we'll go back to these, and I'll and then after I put in, I think, the positive movements towards it. Next slide. So that the reforms from the past, and it's sort of a negative view about technology in the future from 2021 on, are that reforms that have attempted to change the pedagogy or classroom culture have frequently failed. We can add on, we can reorganize, but how teachers teach, and colleagues like Larry Cuban, who's a professor at Stanford, he studied how, taken pictures of classrooms, studied how people have taught over the years, and we're still teaching largely alone, behind classroom doors. The teachers in the front, the kids are arranged in chairs behind that. There's not a lot of technology being used. And so, pedagogy is constant. So that means, that would mean one to predict that, not much will last from this tremendous infusion of teaching by technology that we've had in 2021 and 2020. So most people believe that we need to improve classroom instruction. After all, that's the key. My whole career has been a view that if you're not improving classroom instruction, you're not doing much. So we've tried new policies and approaches, professional development, accountability, testing, all that sort of stuff. And it's had some impact, but not as much as one would like. And we have really not invested as a state, and I'm certainly would say we haven't invested enough in my time in Sacramento in principal and teacher capacity building, and that we've failed really, put out the Common Core, but really didn't develop quickly enough the materials to teach it, or the in-depth staff development to bring it all out, the capacity building, around supporting teachers who are struggling with it. So you get this picture of reform by adding things on, making structural changes, out of school, Sesame Street, that'll last, and then this static pedagogy. And then along comes 2020, and we have, you know what? So let's go back to the prior one, V, if we could. Right, okay, now, let's talk about where we are now and where we're going in the future. We've had a lot of teachers have been using technology at a huge rate. They've been interacting with parents through technology at an astounding rate compared to the past. Many reports, for example, of parent conferences are that they're just as effective as interaction between two people through the technology as they were if the parent came to the school. And they are actually doing better. So we've had this big structural change of teaching from the classroom out into the home, and that has really changed the way we've done it. But then we get in, and now more positive factors, and then I'll get into the problems of creating constituency and easily monitor. These are the things that cause reforms to last and grow. Okay, more good news. The federal and state governments will be providing $36 billion in the next year or so for schools to recover from COVID. $36 billion in California, $36 billion. The state gets 10% set aside of this on a lot of it, so they can do a lot. This is, schools will be very well supported. And that would mean that when there's a rising tide of revenue, you can do things like really make a difference in technology. Secondly, the president announced on Wednesday that he's going to build broadband as part of his infrastructure program everywhere, finally connecting everybody, not having broadband be something that wealthy people buy with fast computer and fast Wi-Fi, and rural people don't have broadband, and lower income people can't afford 5G and so on. So we're going to have an enormous, I think that the president will get this most of his broadband. So now we've wired the schools, and now we're wiring the home, and it's going to really be something. I remember when I came in to be president of the state board in 2011, the average school had the broadband width of the average home. And we spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the Brown administration getting schools broadband. And lo and behold, the day has come for homes much quicker. So we have money, we're going to have broadband. The money will be flexible. The schools will be able to spend it up to 2024 under the federal money that is coming under the education budget, but even more money under the $2 trillion COVID bailout money for state and schools that's there. The amount of money, I don't have this exactly, but my figures are that California schools in the next year or so will get between $3,000 and $4,000 more per pupil. So what I've heard all my career is, oh, technology, it costs a lot. We don't have the money to do that, even though schools seem to find money to do other things. You're going to have the money, and there's going to be no excuse, it seems to me, for not making some kind of big movement in technology. However, however, even more positive is that teachers now have used technology in ways that they never would have without the pandemic. They're used to it. Parents are used to interacting with it. And so I think that's a big plus. So let's then, see where, I don't know where the scales add up here in terms of where we are, but let's look at constituency. You've got it. These are my three characteristics that need to be there. Will there be a positive or negative constituency for the use of technology interaction between the home and technology? There's a negative narrative emerging widespread about technology, that the use of it during COVID was a failure, that technology in K-12 education, quote, doesn't scale well, say the critics. And therefore, we need to get these kids back into school, get them back into classrooms with the door shut, and parent conferences a couple of times a year, and more parent and the usual parent interaction on homework. But we need to get away from this technology as soon as possible. So I can see there's a negative constituency out there rather than a positive one. There are there's some marginal constituencies. High school kids seem to be doing well with it, particularly ones that are middle and upper class. I've seen studies that math scores are going to go up in high schools with technology. It's not established, but many students who were having trouble at school, like being bullied, want to stay home. The parents are going to, of some types, are going to work at home. That has more of a middle and upper income thing. And so they could be, you no longer have to go to school to have child custody. You could have it at home with your parent at home. So that tends to be a positive constituency. I think the biggest thing is, what will the teachers want? They have not been enthusiastic about technology, and the lessons of history are that they were not a positive constituency for bringing technology in wholesale. What will the teacher unions, what has their stance been? I don't know where they are. They seem reluctant to open schools because of the risk. But on the other hand, they have not, particularly in the past, the unions haven't argued for technology. And the last negative is it's not easily monitored. That door shuts and you don't know what they're doing. When a classroom door shuts, you're not sure what the teachers are doing. So you have issues there, but you could probably monitor how often they were on technology by wiring the computers to say when people are using it. So it might be easily monitored. On the other hand, it might not. So where do we end up? This was not a conclusive talk. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I think it's an absolutely fascinating question. I think parents, what is a parent constituency? Where will that go? Will it be split? So will we end up with, say, 30% at home and 70% in the schools? I don't know. Will it all go back to where it was before, with maybe some more assignments at home through technology? Will it be just a marginal change? History would say that would be what would be true, but we know history's being overturned in this through the COVID blitzkrieg of technology. So it's a fascinating question. I'm sure you have, a lot of you have better ideas than I do, but I'm, giving you something to think about. And then I think you need to decide as educators and parents, what do you want? What do you want to happen? What is Silicon Valley Education Foundation? Are they going to have a stance on this? I don't know. So I will close with that. And if we have any time for questions, I'd be happy to take them. So I've got a lot of questions and no answers. And this is a different kind of talk from a professor who mostly have, all pretend they have answers, but sometimes don't. I'm not even pretending. So I've enjoyed this, and we'll look forward to any reactions that we have time for.
Yeah, so we do have a questions for you from the chat, Mike, and for those who are, again, well, everything that he said makes sense, but I have a question for him. Please put it in the chat so I can read it for Mike. So one of the question is, what do you think of professional development provided virtually statewide as a way to develop some kind of common best practices throughout the states?
I dream about it as being a solution that to the professional development problem. I have never been able to figure out, as state board president, as advisor to Governor Jerry Brown starting in 1974, that how to do professional development at scale. And as this COVID unfolded, I began to think, holy moly, maybe this will do it. We unlike overseas countries, particularly Asian countries. I toured Japan for a long time, and Japan sets aside time for teachers to receive professional development, to collaborate. International studies have shown that American teachers are in front of children way much more than the national average. We build in almost no time for this and for professional development. So doing it somehow through virtual means, individualizing it through virtual times, it really is alluring. And I hope it happens, and I hope that's one of the outcomes. So but somebody has to design it and think about it. Who's thinking about all the issues I raised today in terms of making technology more useful in the future? And I think I haven't seen that many people really doing it. So it's a great question. I support it.
So I think there's a lot of the school to home folks are in this room, and I think they are accepting your challenge, Mike. So we do have another questions for you. Would it be helpful for the SBE to hear about the positive impact from school to home, specifically the effective use of integrating technology into teaching and learning and deepening the parent engagement? And I know that you're not you're not 100% familiar with school to home, but I think I kind of discussed with you a little bit about how for school to home, we really value or really focus in bringing different stakeholders into the same table, like the teachers, the parents, the students. And it's a proven concept and framework that it worked, and it's very effective in integrating technology. And you were mentioning earlier that somebody going to have to figure out these 3 challenges that you are proposing. So we were just wondering, well, I guess Sunny, we're just wondering, would it be helpful to present our case study, because school to home is its case study of its own to SBE?
Yes, I think it would be useful. And I think all of this is a fundamental change for meaning the use of technology and with COVID for Silicon Valley Education Foundation as an 11-year board member. I think, first of all, we have to understand what has happened. We've in the home. What has happened in the home? How have the parents reacted to this? All we have is sort of newspaper vignettes that that people are trying to work at home, and school, the computers are. The parents are being distracted. Those that are working, parents that aren't working are saying, "Well, I don't know how to teach math, so and I never was prepared for this." So it's really a lot of unknowns about what is actually going on in the home. Of course, there's all kinds of different home contexts. So how does it vary by the context? Obviously, income's one variable. And prior education of parents is another variable. but we need, you know, how are we going to improve educational attainment? Developing the capacity of our staff is very important. Using the parents better and interacting with the parents better around instruction, not just, you know, behavior in class or something, is I think very important. And so what have we learned? I mean, this was a fantastic natural experiment, not planned. No researchers anticipated this happening. Therefore, there's very little research that I think was done. We thought the kids were going to come back. I wouldn't have done much with this. I thought it was, you know, it was 3 months, it was going to be over. I thought the fall of 2020 was going to be pretty much like the past. So this was a one-off, 3 months. I'm not going to study this. So you know, I think it's a really deep question. I don't know how the foundation can proceed without more data as to exactly what went on and what happened. And the foundation's not a research organization. So I think it's a question of partnering then with research organizations to find out what happened and what worked, what didn't work. Let's assume we have terrific broadband. What can work if we have terrific broadband? Because I think it's probably going to happen. And in the home, terrific broadband in the home. My grandchildren live in Europe, and they have fabulous broadband. It's like you get water in Europe or electricity. You know, it's not something you buy from Comcast if you can afford it. So yeah, it's an important question and calls for deliberation by all types of foundations.
That's such a great picture to think about, that one day all children at least in the state of California would get watered by the internet for free, right? Because rain is free, so is the internet. And I genuinely believe one day we could make it happen. And I think it's also aligned with CETF, the California Emerging Technology Fund, to really trying to bring internet more affordable to all children, or at least in the state of California. I do unfortunately have to close your beautiful segment of the day. And for our guests, please again, if you are interested in in knowing more, having other questions or concern, the challenge that Mike brought to us today is not my personal challenge, but it's our challenge. So for those who are particularly are problem thinkers or problem solvers, this is yours to take. And shoot me an email anytime, because I know that my inbox is always available and open just to receive different kind of innovations from people. All right. So thank you, Mike, so much for joining us again.